Karin, thanks a lot for joining me in this journey to share your insights on this topic, and I'm eager to learn it from you.
All
Okay.
right. Well, thank you so much for joining me and inviting me into the conversation. It should be very interesting, and I will look forward to hearing from the wisdom of others in your interview series.
Wonderful. And since we started already, so Karen, it's very honor for our audience to have a little introduction from you of who you are and the work that you are doing. Would you please do that honor for us?
Sure. So I'm Karin Hurt. I run a company with my husband, David Dye. The company is called Let's Grow Leaders. We are a global leadership development company known for very practical tools and techniques for human-centered leaders. And we work with the brands that you would recognize, some of the big folks, Nestle, Amazon, and then many fast-growing startups. And so our whole journey is to give people practical tools for leadership development that sticks so that they can go back and immediately apply. So we do keynote speaking, we do long-term leadership development programs, we do culture change programs, and we write a lot of books.
I know, I know. Hey, Karen, thanks for doing the introduction in very, very short time, and it's less than a minute, and it's not fair for our audience. And before we start on to that topic of wisdom, I want to dig into your stories a little bit, okay? So you and your husband, David, you guys could do anything in the world, but you decided to help leaders to grow through book writing, through workshop facilitating, through consulting services, from keynote speakings. Why did you guys decide to do that?
Yeah, so we were both executives before starting Let's Grow Leaders, and I was at Verizon for 2 decades. And as I was, so my background is, my educational background is all in this stuff: leadership development, organizational development, a lot of work with research on teams. But then, so my first decade at Verizon was in that space, in HR. But then I went out and did a variety of field assignments. So I led a 2,200 person sales team, a 10,000 person customer service organization. And in doing that, I learned a lot of things about what to do well and what doesn't work. And I also learned from watching other leaders what was the impact that they were having. And one of the things that became very clear to me is that there are some leaders out there still thinking they can lead with fear and intimidation and getting results for a minute. And they're like, well, see, when I do it this way, results go up. But that is no way to get long-term sustained results over time. And I became very passionate about that. And my mission in the world was, how do you teach people that they can get results and stay a decent human being, and give them the practical how? Because it's one thing to say that, but it's another to say, and here's how you have that conversation. Here's how you object in a way that is going to not damage the relationship and still get you the results that you need. Here's how you hold people accountable with maintaining the relationship.
Wow, wow. And this conversation is to ignite the passions and help people to find the mission in their lives, so that to understand more about wisdom, how we're going to grow with that. And I still remember how you told me during our interview last time that you met David and you decided to do something to get the relationship into the next level. So I think it's funny, and it's wise to share that story with our audience again before we move to wisdom, please.
Just in case anybody's over 40 and looking for love, we'll give them a little bonus commercial here. So David and I were both writing. Had both decided to write a book, and so we had met each other online, not the swipe right, swipe left kind of online, but we had both known of each other because we were writing in the same leadership space. And I ran a leadership carnival called Frontline Festival that people contributed to, and he was one of my contributors. So we were aware of each other's writing. Well, one day, David said he read an article that was written in a big HR publication, and he's like, I don't remember submitting this. Well, he gets to the byline, and it's me, and he realizes that, yeah, it is so aligned with what he thinks, but it was clearly my work. So he picks up the phone, and he calls me, and he says, Karin, we're so aligned. I think we should collaborate someday. And I said, sure. Well, we didn't do anything right away because we were both super busy. But then a couple months later, we ran into each other at this book publishing lab in New York City. So it was sponsored by the National Speakers Association. you were there to learn how to attract a publisher, how to do a book proposal. And so we were having lunch. We said, well, what kind of book are you writing? And we realized we were writing almost the same book. So we decided to collaborate. That book is Winning Well, A Manager's Guide to Getting Results Without Losing Your Soul, right? So how do you get results and stay a decent human being? And as the book is published, he's living in Colorado, I'm living in Maryland, but we are talking nearly every day, as you do when you collaborate on something as significant as a book. And we had a chat up on our computers all the time. We were just like chatting, getting to know each other. A lot of drama happened in both of our lives during that time. My mother died, like a lot of things that, when in tragedy, you come closer together with your friends. And so one Saturday morning, he texted me and he said, hey, this girl just asked me out. Do you think I should go? And I felt jealous. And I was like, oh, where did that come from? Because I didn't realize I had any feelings, and besides friendship. And I said, what are you looking for in a woman? So anyway, we decided to start dating, and then we fell in love. We merged our businesses together, and now we help human-centered leaders together all over the world. The interesting thing about our relationship is that we do all of the book writing, the curriculum, design, all of that together. But when we run the business, we have completely different perspectives, different strengths, different skills. And that has been a real joy and also a real learning for us about how to teach collaboration, because we really had to say, this is your role, this is my role, and learn to pull back or step forward depending on what was happening in the business.
Yeah, and it's make you guys very unique in the market, also doing things together, learning from each other every single day through the works you do, right? So how beautiful it is. And when I sat down with my wife, and I always say, okay, if we can have a big words of advice for our friends who are married, it's best, to have that collaboration. Learn how to collaborate well with the partner that you have next to you every day, right? It's a huge learning experience that a lot of people miss doing and using it. Okay. Yeah. So Karin, to the topic of wisdom, I think is let's start with a small baby step first by sharing the definition of wisdom. So in your own word and your own definition, what is wisdom to you?
I think wisdom really stems from having a broader perspective and understanding that you are a small but influential element in the world, and then trying to understand that how you show up in any given moment matters, and then having the skills to be able to do that well. So wisdom comes from being grounded in values. It's about being genuinely interested in other people's perspectives, having a strong point of view, but also being genuinely interested in people's perspectives.
Wow. So it's started from broader perspective, right? Then now you're just a small piece in that whole big world of information, of knowledge. Then show up and know how to show up right, and have the skill to do that well. What's the last one that I couldn't write here?
So I forget what I said. It doesn't matter. But I think, when I see people who are wise, it's how they are showing up in the room. Wise people, and because for me, I'm grounded in philosophy. All our work is grounded in research, but I'm the practical person, right? So I was prepared for this conversation, and I thought, what are some practical ways that people show up wise at work? And I see it's the people who can slow the conversation down. Like everybody is racing off, let's go do, and someone pulls back. Is this the right thing? Should we be heading in this direction? They bring a wisdom in the room, and people really listen. They are aware of their emotional ripple. So even if they're upset, they are calm under pressure. They calm the conversation down, and they bring out that bigger presence in others. I think wise people ask better questions, more provocative questions. they're not always the one that's speaking the most, but when they speak, people are leaning in to really hear. And they choose progress over ego, as opposed to say, well, I wanted to do it this way, but if I slow down, I get my stakeholders aligned, I bring all this together, and it may not be exactly the way I wanted it to be, but we move forward, they're okay with that because they're curious and committed to the greater good.
Beautiful. So you say that the wise people will be able to see the bigger picture so that they can orchestrate the conversation, the meeting, and how to control the movement of that, right?
Yeah.
So what do they need to do in order for them to get into that level of being able to observe, being able to have that influence, and be able to control the flow around the table, especially when things got hit up?
So I think there's becoming wise, and then there's acting wise, right? And so how do you become wiser, right? I mean, none of us are so wise, right? But how do we become as wise, continuously wiser? And I was thinking about, well, where does my wisdom come from? And it comes, I think, really comes from a couple of places. One, it comes from your own experiences. But here's the thing, experience doesn't just necessarily make you wise. I know a number of very old people who are not necessarily wise, right? But it is what you learn from those experiences. If you make a mistake, do you pull back and say, okay, A, what can I learn from this? But also, how do I make this right? And so I think that's one piece, so really learning from your experiences, having a breadth of experiences. One of the reasons I believe I am a little bit more wiser than I used to be at work is because I didn't just stay in my lane in HR, right? I went and led a sales team. I led a customer service organization, right? I started my own company. I work with companies around the world. Every time I have an experience that feels a little bit scary, that's different, that gives you that broader perspective. So putting yourself in a position to have a wide range of experiences. Between David and I, we have 3 children, and one of the things that we're both very committed to doing is giving them a range of experiences. So, for example, when we went to the Philippines last year for a couple of weeks on a similar tour as we're heading into Vietnam, we took Sebastian out of high school and took him with us, so that he could go into these communities, he could go into the orphanages, he could work with, he was the intern in our big HR conferences, he could meet people who are different than him. And I could just see his eyes getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, when he showed up at college for his freshman year, people were using the words like, you're wise for your years. Well, part of that is because he's had a breadth of experiences, and he's had the opportunity to reflect on this. And that's a privilege. Not everybody can do that, of course. But every one of us has a choice of, do we do things that stretch us? Can we help us to be in conversation with people who are very different than us? So I think for learning from your mistakes, giving yourself exposure to a variety of experiences is really important. And then that's learning for yourself. And then there's the learning from others. And that is really digging into the research that other people have done, digging into the philosophical wisdom of people who spend a lot of time thinking about wisdom and what makes people wise, and pondering on that, reflecting on it, and then learning from others about how you're showing up in the world. So learning from others through 360-degree feedback, asking people for how did I show up in that meeting? What was the impact on you? Those kinds of tactical things can help you become a little bit more wiser.
Wow. Karin, you are a very practical person. So everything that you say is always covered with actions, right? With something that we could do in here. So first is, we get wiser through learning from ourselves, right? So what works for us, what can help us to grow. And then the other thing is learning from others. So I want to start with learning from self first. And you said in here that put yourself in a position that we can be having more exposure and more experiences, right? And um, my own boss always say that opportunities and experience are running in front of us, like car driving on the high speed freeway, right? But it's whether or not we be able to see it is important. Whether or not we be able to catch it is important, and whether or not we be able to catch it on time to make sure that you catch the right opportunity, the right experience on time is important also. So that requires the skill to make yourself available out there to watch and then to catch, right? So Karin, how can we build that skills up in order for us to be able to notice, catch, and hold those experience for us to learn them?
Yeah, so I think it's showing up with curiosity. So in both of our books, we're all about the last two books, all about curiosity. So what is this? What can I learn from this experience? Asking yourself that. When you are working with other people, what is it that's making them effective? What is about how they're showing up in this conversation is derailing the conversation, right? And so being an observer, and I always say you want to show up interested and interesting in any given room. So, don't just be an observer, because you also need to be influencing. So how do I show up interesting with a point of view, right? Confident that what I have to say matters, but also really, interested in what else is happening here, what's going on, going a level deeper. In our book, our new book that we're going to be talking about when we are in Vietnam working with you, Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict, we have several GOATs, greatest of all time powerful phrases that we talk about. And one of them is a clarity GOAT, which is, what would a successful outcome do for you? And that is a question that will bring wisdom. So imagine that you and I are working on a project together. And I say, and we know what we're supposed to do. Like, we know what the outcome is, we know what success looks like. But we take 5 minutes and we say, what would a successful outcome do for you? And you would share your motivations, what you're really hoping to get out of it. I would share my motivations, what I'm hoping to get out of it. We would share our concerns. Having that conversation then really helps us to collaborate and to give and take, right? And to show up more wise in that relationship, instead of just why is this person doing this? Why are they acting this way? Well, it's helpful to understand where they're coming from.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we go back to the thing that you say earlier is the ability to ask good questions. So wise people tend to ask good questions, right? And Karin, for you and David, you have people to get wiser. You have leaders to be to lead the team better and be better leaders, right? What kind of question do you ask yourself every day?
Mm. One of the questions we literally ask ourselves, not even just every day, but like 12 times a day, is what is most important right now? And we teach in our leadership programs, we call it the MIT, the most important thing, and we teach people to think in terms of a pyramid. So what is most important at the strategic level? Like, what are the 2 or 3 big things you're working on as an organization? What are the most important initiatives under that? What are the most important activities? And then, very importantly, what are the most important habits that, if you do them consistently, will make the biggest difference? And to understand, grounding yourself in that. So, obviously, running a leadership development company, one of the most important things is our client experience. Do people come and have a unique, best-in-class experience learning something that they're going to apply, right? Because that's our mission, that they're going to go be able to do something. So that is a most important thing. Being a thought leader in the world is a most important thing for us. It's important that we don't phone it. We don't use ChatGPT to write blog posts for us, right? We are doing our original research. We're sharing our experiences. We're writing. Like, all of these things are most important things, but they all run down to a habit level. But in any given moment, you have to have a laser focus on what's the most important thing. So yesterday, for example, we had a cyber attack hitting our website.
Oh.
Now, our website is everything for us, right? We've got 1,500 articles. We have universities that depend on our articles. We have clients that depend on our articles. It's our marketing. It is a big problem when, like 5 minutes before I get a call, university calls us and says, we've just blocked your site. Okay, this is not good. But also, I went in and David and I were both about to get on an executive leadership development program virtually with our largest client. Wisdom looks like this is a big problem. Like we quickly got, made the phone calls. We needed to get some people working on the thing. But then when we showed up in that meeting, just focused on the most important thing, those executives in the room. It wouldn't have done any good to show up frantic and like spewing, oh my God, we're so worried about this thing. Blah, blah, blah. That wouldn't serve them. So how do, the wisdom to say, okay, I did what I could do. Now for the next 75 minutes, I got to focus on doing the best I can for these leaders. And then I'll go back to deal with this problem. And I think that is one way. And I'm not sure that's hard to do when when your brain is like, what am I going to do? Right. But, how do you just show up and say, there's nothing I can do right now in this moment except this thing, which is be present for these leaders. Right.
Wow. And I wish people have the list of important things to do, so for them to focus on what's the most important thing out of that to-do list, right? So what's wrong with, what's going on with a lot of us that we don't have the important things on our basket to focus, to do?
It's hard because there are so many competing priorities, right? Both of those things were most important, right? But we call it infinite need, finite me, mind the MIT. So there's always going to be more than you can possibly do in any given moment, right? So to know what your big strategic priorities are, to be able to say no to certain opportunities, and because at this point in our careers, I told you how many interviews I said no to, right? Just this month, right? And so to say, I wish I could, I'd like to contribute in this way, but I just can't, because if I spent my entire day doing interviews, I'm not going to accomplish these other most important things that matter most. So I think it's having the confidence to know where you're headed, what matters, to know that sometimes, every time you say yes to something or someone, you say no to something or someone else, right? And to be able to say, I have to be true to my mission in the world here, and it doesn't mean saying yes to every single thing. So that's I think that's a piece of it. So one of the things is, what is the most important thing? Another question we ask ourselves is, how can we best be of service to our mission in here? And so that really helps to inform the choices. And a lot of times it's not making the most money that we could possibly do, right? It's why we're going to Vietnam for 2 weeks, and the majority of that money is all going to women's and children's charities in Vietnam from all of those events, right? That we're partnering with Scott Friedman. Together We Can Change the World, and that's a deliberate choice, right? And by doing that, we're saying no to a lot of other things that we could be back here doing, right? I said no to at least 3 keynotes in the United States during that period of time, right? So I think that is another question. How do we best serve our mission? And is this aligned? Is this choice aligned with our mission? Like, what would a human-centered leader do in this moment? And asking ourselves that question, because everybody is watching how we show up too, right? And if we have behaviors that don't feel human-centered, which of course we do, right? And because we're human, but are we living with that intention? And are we having the courage to speak up and have the tough conversations with executives that are our clients when we see them behaving in ways that are not human-centered, knowing that the risk is we might get fired? But that's okay, because that's all part of our mission.
Wow. Karin, you say no to a lot of interviews out there, but you say yes to my conversation with you, and I feel honored, and I'm thankful for you to say yes to this conversation, and thank you very much. Okay.
It's my pleasure.
And before I go to the mission, I want to go back into the confidence and wisdom, because you say that, you know, when with wisdom people have more confidence, and I want to ask whether or not, if when people have more confidence, would they have more wisdom on the best way like that?
Not necessarily. We call this, we call it landing in the and of confidence and humility. And you need both. It's the confidence to have an audacious vision, the confidence to stand up for what matters, the confidence to speak the truth, coupled with the humility to surround yourself with people who will challenge you, to know your vulnerabilities, both as a leader and an organization, and to admit when you're wrong. And that's landing in the and. If you've got confidence without humility, it's hard to be wise. Right? Because you have one perspective, and there are a lot of people in the world to learn from, and so that there's a lot of audacity to say, I know exactly what to do here. I you know that and there are leaders in the United States, right, who are leading with that confidence without humility, and there is a lot that's getting screwed up because of that.
Wow. So, assuming that I am, or one of our audience, that the kind of leaders that, you know it alls, and so if, and we know that is something that we need to change. So, what baby steps do I need to make change, or do they need to make change so that they can become a better leader, Karin?
The first thing I would do, one of the practical ways that we teach this is we call it a do-it-yourself 360. And so if you're familiar with the traditional 360s where, you know, it's an anonymous survey and you do the feedback and then it comes and you get this bar graph and you're like, my boss sees me this way and my peers see me this way and my direct reports see me this way. Love those. Very useful. There is also value in what we call this do-it-yourself, which is a voice-to-voice conversation with people. So you pick an area that you really want feedback on, as specific as possible, and then you craft a couple of open-ended questions that you really believe, and they're specific enough so that people will feel safe to give you the feedback. And then you go have the conversation. And you talk with your manager, you talk with your peers, you talk with direct reports, you talk with other stakeholders, you talk with customers, and you ask them these questions. And then you look for the themes. So frequently, people, it's the conversation versus the just looking at it on paper. Because when you get that graph on paper, it's easy to get defensive. Who said this? Why did they say this? And you can't ask the follow-up question. And often people say, I didn't realize I was coming across this way. And was doing a leadership program for a very large government institution in the United States. And one of the men in the surveys, in the program, raised his hand when I was talking about this, and he said, you know, I did this, and he was white, and he had a black woman on his team who said, you're a bully. And he said, not in a million years would he have considered himself to be a bully. And he said that conversation completely changed the way he led, because then he got curious. He's like, first of all, I am so sorry that you have felt bullied by me. Right? He owned it. And now I really need, and that is not my intention to show up that way. So can you tell me specifically, what did I do that made you feel that way? And it turned out it was his tone of voice. It was the way he was showing up in certain meetings. It was shutting people down. And he needed to hear that. But at least he had the curiosity, because he could have gotten defensive and he was like, you should know what she's talking about. I'm not a bully, right? It would have been easy to do. And people will do that. Like, I don't intend to be a bully, therefore I'm not a bully. And so I think that's part of it is, are you really open? If somebody's giving you feedback, are you really listening?
Wow. So So that leading to your recent works with David in the past 2 years, you just mentioned earlier, is about having people to get more curious, right? Because that reflective moment and then leading with curiosity, that helped that leader you just mentioned led the organization, has led the organization in a completely different way, right? So what can we do to create the curiosity, the capacity to be more curious, Karin?
So I think it's breaking it down to be very practical. Because, you tell, one of the biggest mistakes I see happening in leadership development or mentoring is people will use big words like, not that curiosity is a big word, but you need to be more curious, or you need to be more strategic, you need to be a better team player, a better critical thinker. Well, what does that actually mean in terms of practical, tactical habits? Like, what does that mean? So if you tell somebody to be more curious, maybe you give them some words that they can use. And so that's why we wrote this book on powerful phrases, right? So is to give them some words that they can use. If they were in I'm curious how this looks from your perspective. That's an easy to use phrase. Tell me more, right? What do you think we should do next? Like, you could teach anybody those 3 powerful phrases, right, to use consistently, and say, okay, before you offer your opinion, ask one of those questions and listen, right? You could teach anybody at any level to ask those, and it would be helpful. I was thinking about some other powerful phrases that define wisdom. You caused me to write an article last night on wisdom. I'm sitting with 2 truths that feel in tension. Can we talk through that? There's a lot we don't know yet. Let's name that before we rush in to fix it. That's a strong reaction. Can you help me understand what's underneath it? I don't need to win this. I want to get it right. Right? So these again are skills that you can teach people. And sometimes when you can give them, like, just try this. Like, that's what I always will say to a leader. Like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, just try it. Use these words and then see what happens. And then when they realize that when they have asked a question like that, or they use a powerful phrase that is effective, confidence breeds confidence. When they realize that they're actually having more collaboration, then they're more likely to use those words again. And then they're more likely to be able to make up their own words in any given situation that are going to make sense because they understand the value of using the right words.
Wow. So it means that we need to redefine and redesign our vocabulary, the phrase pool that we can have, to use in our daily lives, not only at work, but also in living as human beings, and, having private conversations, right? So, Karin, I want to bring us to when we were young. When we were children, we genuinely care for one another. We were curious to ask about, what's wrong, and try to use that little vocabulary, vow that they have, right, to try to explain to the best. So everything seems to be pretty cool when we were young, when we were little, right? But along the way, when we grow up and get into the leadership role, a lot of things has changed that made us becoming less tolerate for one another, less understand about the perspective of one another, and leading in a way that we don't want it to be. Maybe we want to be differently, but one way to the other ways lead us to that directions. And so what's wrong with us along the way?
Well, experiences, we learn from experiences, and it's what is the lesson that we learn from experience. But it's interesting. Dr. Amy Edmondson of Harvard is really considered to be the pioneer of psychological safety. She says that people are more likely to hold on to a negative experience with speaking up or sharing a truth than a positive one, and overweight the negative impacts that they might have in the future. And I'll be so scared, and say, so that's why we have so many people say, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stay in where I feel safe, right? And because we're holding on to these negative experiences. And that is why I think it's so important to give yourself a range of experience and have the courage. And, we talk about practical ways to be a bit more daring, little baby practical steps to be a little bit more daring. Brene Brown says it's hard to hate people up close. And yet with social media, we are in our own bubble, and we say things that all of our friends agree with us, and then we're like, oh, look how smart I am because everybody agrees with me. Guess what? Not everybody agrees with you. And to have the courage to go talk to the people that the algorithm is not shoving into your feed, and to have deep conversations. The other day, David had a conversation with his mother that I think was incredibly courageous. And without getting into a lot of detail on it, because it's his story to tell, but from a political point of view, his mother is in a different place than he is. And he went and he took her to breakfast, and he said, I really want to understand. And he just listened. And they didn't come together completely, and no one radically changed their mind. But as a relationship, at least he understands, and at least she understands where things are coming from a little bit more. And I think we need more of that in the world, quite honestly. And it's why we are so focused on not just doing our work in the United States. Right? That is a very limited perspective. And the other day it was not the other day, about 2 years ago, but we were in Switzerland, and one of the leaders in our program said, that's a very American perspective on something that I said. And I was like grateful for that feedback. So tell me more. Why do you see it that way? What is the Swiss perspective on it? Right? And that is how we grow, to get our perspective brought in.
Beautiful. So Karin, when you say that in the very earliest of our conversation, wisdom comes from the knowledge that we be able to expose to, right? And in the world with so many opinions, so many different directions, so many noises, so many information out there, it's easily coming to information overload for a lot of us, and our brain can retain certain things, right? If we put the trash into it, then all we get out is just trash, right? So what can we do, Karin, to be able to first is to get information that is important, that's relevant for us, and second is you say later on to the conversation is about to open to ideas from different people also, so similar to that, because if you say yes to listen to those ideas, then you say no to being able to have exposure to different ideas that can be better also. So the future in the selection period, selection process is important in here. How can we improve that area?
Well, I think part of it is focus. You can't be an expert in everything. And so know, where do you really want to go deep? What do you really want to become an expert in? And then not try to pretend that you are an expert in other areas that you are not. That's one thing. I mean, you could put me pretty much on a stage with a microphone and ask me questions about leadership and culture, and I will be able to give you pretty informed answers to those questions, because I have spent my life studying it, studying the research, doing my own original research, working with people, right? So I put in the 10,000 hours or whatever that Malcolm Gladwell says, and I'm just confident. Now, I've been recently spending a lot of time learning about AI, because it's an important, right? It is changing our world, it's changing our corporations, it's changing our cultures. And from time to time, I am asked to speak on AI. And so what I say is, here is my angle, because this is the only place that I am really, how do you stay human-centered in the age of AI? That's what I'll speak to. Now, I could show people techniques that how do we take our research sets and do a qualitative analysis. I could say all that. And we use AI for that kind of stuff, but we are not the experts. Like, there are people smarter than us in the world on that. And so to be able to say, yeah, I use it for this and that, and find it valuable, but who's really the expert in it, and then point to the experts. So I was asked by Training Magazine to come speak on AI, and I said, great. I'm going to have a panel. And then I brought in 4 people from around the world, right, who are experts in AI. And I am going to facilitate it to draw out their wisdom. And I'm going to bring the human-centered angle. Right? And so I think that level of humility is important. I have the confidence that I belong in that conversation, but the humility is that I do not belong in that conversation alone. Yeah.
Wow. Karin, you mentioned about focus. That is the second half of this year for us. So we bought a lot of books on the topic of focus, and we are going to deep dive into those for Q4 release of our conversation about this. Maybe by then I'll get back to you, and you're not gonna say no to me to see how we're gonna be able to grow our ability to focus. So go back to you. We have a friend in common. It's Michael Bungay-Steniers, right? He says to have a curious a little longer. So how could you? And I really have a huge admiration for those people who have the interest on certain areas, and like you and David on the topic of leadership, on how to help people to get better, right? So how can you nurture that mission, that passion inside of you, that long enough so it keep growing inside of you, where a lot of people out there have a little bit interest here and there and drop the ball, half bake the cake in a period, and never had a chance to experience the end result of anything that really important in their lives.
Yeah, so it's so funny that you mentioned Michael Bungay-Steniers, because we were just with him like 2 days ago. And I was chairing a conference that is it's called ISA, Association of Learning Providers, and it's all people who run training and development organizations. So to be in the room, you need to run a training and development organization. I happened to be chairing the conference, and David happened to be chairing the award committee. This is part of why we're so busy right now, because we just also did all this. And Michael Bungay-Steniers won one of the awards, the Thought Leader Award. And so David was on the stage interviewing Michael, and he asked about curiosity. And the thing about it is that I really believe that he shows up very confident, but also extremely humble that he doesn't know everything. You know, he's sold millions of books, but on that stage he said, yeah, but the thing is, if I just say doing the things that I'm really good at and really confident in, then that's a boring life. You know, like, so it's that I am comfortable being uncomfortable, that I'm putting myself into bigger and bigger rooms where people are, you know, really digging deep into these topics. We're going to go to London in November for the Thinkers 50 conference. And there will be people in that room, right, who are smarter than us in a lot of ways. And we're doing that on purpose, right? Because it's easy to just stay in the rooms where you have done the most research. But what if you go and Amy Edmondson will be there, right? Michael Bungay-Steniers will be there. And we are going to convene a conversation around conflict and collaboration with one of our biggest competitors, right? Having the confidence, like, you know, so Leanne Davies, she wrote a book on conflict. We wrote a book on conflict. She does research and collaboration. We do research and collaboration. And we're going to hold hands and convene a conversation while we're in London, because we both know that the mission is bigger than us and our companies, right? And so I think when you say, how do you do that? You got to let go of some of that ego, because you got to say, do I really care about leaving the world a better place? Well, then I've got to do that by expanding my peripheral vision.
Beautiful. So you mentioned about Leah and David. I mentioned about MBS earlier, and then when you mentioned about Leah and David, we're having her on the show next week. So
well, tell her I said hello.
Now, I just have a few last questions for this conversation. So, Karin, my wife and I, we've been on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, because we believe that thinking is critically important, and that capacity has been diminishing for many reasons. So, at least in our opinion only. Okay, so that's why every conversation like this, we want to have something that can be practical, so people can take home, can think, reflect, and use to improve their ability to think. So, Karin, over the years, how have you been growing your ability to think?
Well, again, I'm going to give you one practical way to do it.
Yes.
So this is what we call our Own the Ugly model. And I know you've read Courageous Cultures, and it comes from that. And it's 4 strategic questions. And we use this with teams all over the world. So take a business challenge that you have and ask these 4 questions to help reframe the problem. What are we underestimating? Like, what are we underestimating that's good about this situation? What are we underestimating that's bad? You know, maybe our competitors are further ahead than we think. We might be underestimating that. We might be underestimating how skilled our employees are to rise to the occasion. What's got to go? What do we need to stop doing in order to make this happen? Where are we losing? Where are we losing to the competition? One of the things I'm spending a lot of time with executive teams right now is to look at how they look at data, looking at trends of data. What is this data saying, right? So what is the data? Where does the data tell us we're losing? And then most importantly, and in chapter 6 of Courageous Cultures, we talk about this, where are we missing the yes? And where is there a completely different way to reframe this problem? And so this is part of our idea incubator process, which is part of our critical thinking, how we teach critical thinking in organizations. So, for example, right when we get back from Vietnam, I'm going to work with a very senior team at Honeywell Aerospace. And if you're watching the news, they are in a very exciting transition, and there's been some things that are happening. They're in a period of exciting new growth. And so one of the things that we're going to do is talk about, given the future that they want, and we're going to ask those 4 questions, right, and really have a deep conversation around that. So I think that's, for me, it's always about, you need to think about this more deeply. It's too broad. Give people some tactical, practical tools and techniques to do it well.
Beautiful, beautiful. And now to the saying yes thing. So you say no to a lot of things to save the energy and resources, to saying yes thing that you are going to say yes. So I'm just curious to see what is that David and Karin are going to say yes to.
So that's a very interesting and good provocative question. So one of the things that we have always in our company said, we'll have other people on the team who help with admin and marketing, but we're the teachers. And so we'll say, I've said this on so many sales calls. Now, when you work with us, you're not working with a 27-year-old that we've trained in our IP. You get us, which means that we're in the room. We can answer any question. Well, that has worked very well for us for the last 12 years. But the problem with that is it is impossible to scale. And we're running out of days, right? We are running out of days. And we started to say, are we having the biggest impact on human-centered leadership in the world that we could by maintaining that? Because A, we're tired, and B, we're having to say no to a lot of clients who A, can't afford us, or we just are out of days. So we have built, what we've decided to say yes to is to build a facilitator program around our collaboration IP. So we have built a product. We spent the last 2 years developing this product, which is called the Synergy Stack System. Very difficult, by the way, to get the card decks into Vietnam. So if you know how to do that, the government is not really fond of importing card decks into Vietnam. So I'm curious about that one. But what we're doing is we now have facilitator certifications, and we've trained about, I think, 25 people so far around the world. We just started it. And we've made it super easy for them to access the IP. So we have, it's a card deck, but behind that, there's a whole resource center with facilitation guides that are super easy to follow. If you're building, working with an executive team or working with a project team or doing mentoring and coaching. And then a resource center with our videos and articles that people could access. So the reason I say that is it was a huge leap for us to say we are willing to let go and teach other people our content in a way that they can be facilitators. So that's the yes we're leaning into for this year. We're speaking at the Global ATD conference in DC, doing that in a number of different ways while we're there. So I think that is going to be an interesting experiment for us to see how that goes. That's our yes.
Beautiful. So now become not only just to help leaders to get better, but also become a multiplier of many, many more Karins and David, right?
Yes.
So that's really exciting. Yes. I think that I will tell Liz Wiseman that now we have a practitioner of her practice right there. So the last question is about, two last questions. One is about your childhood. So when you were little, what was your dream about the future things that you are going to do, Karin?
I wanted to sing on Broadway.
Scott said that you have a very beautiful voice. So next time when you are here, you're going to sing with us, okay?
So what is funny is Sebastian, my youngest son, is studying theater in college. And so I'm getting on a plane in a few minutes here to go to Boston to see him in a show. So he is following close. So who knows? Maybe it'll be him.
So Karin, if you had a chance to travel back in time and talk to that little Karin who wanted to become a singer and sing on Broadway, and tell her that little Karin about a beautiful journey that she is going to have in the future, what is that one thing that you're really proud to say to that little Karin?
You know, I'm really proud to say that I took courageous risks. And that I have so far, I hope it's a long life, but I've had a lot of adventure, and I've been in a lot of rooms, and I've been on a lot of stages. And so maybe it didn't turn out that I was on Broadway, but I certainly get to have my voice heard in the world in a variety, both my actual voice and my voice in writing, and it's making a difference. So I think I would tell her, just that drive, you know, like that energy is good, and it's going to show up in ways that it might surprise you.
Beautiful. And you see the stage that you are performing right now is way bigger than Broadway, way larger than Broadway, isn't it? Right? So what is the one thing that you are going to tell her to not doing so that she'll get to that stage earlier?
I rushed into my first marriage too fast, and that's you know, Dan Pink. I interviewed Dan Pink. I don't know if you've interviewed him. You know, he wrote a book on regrets and asked people about their biggest regrets. And
Daniel Pink.
Daniel Pink, yeah. And yeah, I think that is it. Like, slow down. You don't need to live your life in one day. You know, it's going to be okay. And, you know, but I was like, oh, gotta get married, and I should not have gotten married at 22. And so that, I would say, is what the advice I'd be like, it's going to be okay. Somebody else will love you if you don't say yes to this guy. You know?
Hey, Karin, we have a wonderful conversation today, and I really love you and David. I look forward to see you both in Vietnam. And thank you so much for joining me in the topic of wisdom that we can share to the world. There's so many practical things that you brought into this conversation that really helpful for us to reflect, to think, and to do something with that, so that we can, you know, grow older but wiser also, right?
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. I am looking forward to our collaboration in Vietnam.
I know, me too. Bye bye, my friend. Yeah, have a good day, okay?
Thanks, you too.
Bye bye.